Another month has passed, so here's another video on the games I played during it. I'll keep it up until I stop doing these, but that's not anytime soon. And continuing on from last month, I finally completed all the seasons of Telltale's The Walking Dead, and I can now say that it sits in a comfortable spot on my top 5 favorite games list. The impact this game has made on me, especially with the characters and the tie between Clementine and Lee, has been quite immense. Again, I won't be including any spoilers, but I'll give a quick ranking of all the seasons. Season 1 is definitely my favorite and sits perfectly as its own thing, but being expanded on with the 3 other seasons just made me fall in love with it even more. Season 4, the final season, comes in slightly behind Season 1 just because of how well it ties the story up, and it feels much more like a return to form rather than the 2 previous seasons, with better pacing and deeper characters. And after that I have Season 2, with expanding on what was set in Season 1 and introducing a bunch of new characters while also revisiting some old ones. It was really fun to see the new dynamics and troubles between them all, but I felt like everything felt really rushed. Not in the actual development, but in the pacing of the story. After one big event, there would immediately be something else going on, and we never really got much of a break. And with Season 3 at last, it also has the complaints that I had for Season 2, but more so with the characters. And throughout all the seasons, while a lot of the characters are incredibly memorable, and there are some that are even my most favourite from any media I've ever seen, throughout all the seasons, there would always be characters that would provide specific dynamics to the group, and then were killed off, and then a different character in the next season would just have the exact same personality and make the same mistakes as them. And eventually it just became a guessing game on when and how a character would die. But for a game that's literally all about the characters and the relationships, it would be hard to write unique personalities every time while also keeping the game fresh. I feel like I'm rambling on, but it's just hard to talk about the game like this without any spoilers. So all I gotta say is, if you haven't yet, you need to play these games. And once I did finish The Walking Dead on stream, I decided to finally pick up Dying Light. And I can't believe I kept pushing it aside for the last decade because I had a great time, frankly. I wouldn't put it in my top 5 favorites, but it's definitely one of the games of all time. Firstly, with the story, it's where I have the most to talk about. There are very memorable story beats and the characters are fairly well written, but many of the NPCs that you meet also just act to move the plot forward. There are many themes put forward: suffering, bravery, and the greed of humans and war, but it mostly just blends in with other action games and media that I've seen from that early 2010 era. They do some cool stuff with Crane's infection getting stronger, which gives some pretty interesting Far Cry 3 vibes, but it isn't anything mind-blowing. But mostly, it's all just issues that I have with the pacing and some of the connections and relationships that you have with the characters. But my issues with the story really don't even matter all that much because of how much effort they put into the gameplay. It's all about the slashing, shooting, running and jumping, which is all peak. The leveling system, although simple, is so fun and rewarding. And even though you're only picking up little bits here and little bits there, after a while you almost feel like a god. And you need that confidence for when the sun goes down, because it can turn into a horror game real quick. And in terms of content, there's a lot of stuff in the game, from all the side quests to the whole heap of DLC weapons and equipment that I barely even touched in my playthrough. But yeah, I'm gonna get to the sequel eventually and then the beast, but the game's just peak. And after my dive into Killing Floor 1 last month, I managed to pick up its much loved sequel on a decent sale, and I've been enjoying it a lot. Some would call it just a complete improvement upon the first, with better sounds, graphics, more varied enemies and bosses, more classes to play as, and a more rounded selection of weapons, and that is true for a lot of things, but I would slightly disagree. Firstly, yes, the game's a lot of fun. With a lot more weapons to play around with, there's a lot more ways that you can go about your loadouts, and they all sound and look absolutely beautiful. But my biggest issue really just comes from the monetization and live service model, especially with added loot crates and items that you can sell and trade on the Steam market, while also having multiple DLC. And even though the first game also had a bunch of DLC, they were fairly well priced and didn't have glorified slot machines. But it's all fine if you look past it and just play the game, but it's still something to think about. I think the biggest difference is definitely how easy it feels in comparison. The first game was tough, and they added a lot of stuff to quote-unquote baby ties easy mode the game, especially with the addition of a sprint mechanic, but all of that doesn't really take away from the experience. It just makes the two feel much further apart, like comparing CS 1.6 to CS2, or maybe more like going from Risk of Rain, fucking Whisk of Wayne, or more like going from Risk of Rain 1 to Risk of Rain 2. But it's just a really fun and intense horde shooter. Honestly, no complaints, other than all the complaints that I just had. And then with the announce of the ODST Warbond, I had to come back to Helldivers 2, especially since the last time I talked about it on this channel was, holy shit, back in October? Yeah, it's about time. And the game is so fun. I'm sure I don't need to yap about how good it is since everyone for the past 2 years have already been doing that for me. But this time, even though I still mostly play solo, I finally got some of my friends onto the game, and one of them is an Xbox player too. And I have to say, congrats to Arrowhead for getting the game so big that PlayStation Xbox literally ended the console war just to have it on both platforms. Truly a moment of all time. As for the game itself, the thing I love most is how stunning the colors and volumetric lighting is on every planet I visit. They all have a consistent color palette that just pulls everything together nicely. And I can't even wrap my head around how they do it with them all being randomly generated or whatever they do with it. I have no clue. But easily my biggest note for the game and what ties it all up in a big red bow is the cinematic feel over the fights and the explosions. No matter what you're doing, it's absolute cinema. It's just mind-blowing how they did all of this as such a small development studio. This time around, I've definitely put a lot more hours into it, and it's one of those games that gets so much better the more you play it. And especially with Xbox players joining the fight and a pretty big update coming September 2nd, the game is in a really good place. For freedom and democracy.